All right, so far we have a rigid body that loads in, and we have our speed. And you'll notice off to the side here, in our Visual Studio file, we have a variable called RB, another variable called speed. And speed is currently holding a reference to the value 10f. So you can think of speed as the number 10. And f means float, which means it's equivalent to something like this. But because we want those incremental changes in our speed, we made it a float instead of an integer, which looks more like this, which doesn't have a decimal point. And then RB is referencing our rigid body component. So let's go ahead and create another method. Remember, this is what a method looks like. And this method is going to run every frame. And say your computer runs at 30 frames per second, depending on how powerful your video card is. Some go 60, some go 90, 120, so forth. We're going to create a method that's another one like start, which is made by Unity, and it's called fixed update. Now, fixed update is used for um, it's used more for anything that has to do with physics that you want to run every frame. So let's go ahead and grab this print statement, and I'm just going to highlight it, and then with my left mouse, just click on the word print and drag it down here. Another way of doing it, and don't forget your P, right, is just hit Control X and then paste it in here. And I can do hello from, I'm double clicking the word here to select it, Control C and then Control V, and hello from fixed update. And what you'll notice is if we look at our console from last time, so here's our console, we have one hello from start. Now I'm going to clear this. Look how many are happening as we press play. It just keeps going. And notice that the second count right here, here's our, it's 8:41, here's our seconds. It's playing one every second. Really, it's playing more than one every second because if there's 30 frames in a second, it's just too quickly to compute it. So why would this be good? Why would we need to check something every second? Well, say we want to check if if our players are pressing keys. And so a good way to do that is to look at their input. So now Unity has this nifty thing where it goes edit, if we go to edit project settings and we look at, here's our project settings, we click on input, you'll notice, come on, let's expand this out a little bit. It has this thing called axis and it has all these keywords. So mouse scroll wheel, and it has these parameters. It says mouse movement, third axis of a joystick or scroll wheel, mouse movement. If we look at these two here, it says horizontal. Horizontal is mapped to the A key and the D key, or the left and right arrow keys on your keyboard. So we can use these names, horizontal and vertical. We can also create our own by doing 19, by adding one, because we have 18 there. We can go to 19, hit enter, and you'll see here's another one. And we can rename this to demargin movements or whatever we want. And you'll notice it updates here, and we can use that later. And this one's mapped to joystick button 1. So right now I'm not terribly concerned with this. If I make it 18 again, you'll notice it deleted that. So let's go ahead and use horizontal and vertical in our code. So spelling and is important. So case sensitivity is important. So I'm going to make a variable, and I'm going to call it move horizontal, and I'm going to make it equal to that input. Remember we looked up input dot get axis. Now what I'm looking to get is that horizontal, remember to put it in quotes, input. Now again, if I spell this wrong, it will not store that input, and I'm also not going to get an error. So what I'm going to do is in front of this to save time, hit Control D, and I'm going to change this to move vertical. I would like you to type this just so you can get used to coding this out. Move vertical, and then I want to change this to vertical. Now the thing to understand, let's save this, is this isn't really doing any movement. All this is doing is storing some sort of numerical decimal value. So based on how much I push down on those A and D keys for the horizontal or the left and right arrow keys, it's going to store that value the entire time I'm pressing it because we're checking every frame. So as this keeps running and running and running and running and running it, if I push, depending on how much pressure down I push on that left arrow key, this will update. And the same thing with this. This is mapped to W and S and the up and down arrow keys. So how do we actually get this to move? Well, we need to, um, and we should really comment this a little bit better. Checking if our players are pressing the, let's make sure this is spelled right, pressing the WASD keys. Now, it's funny because some of the greatest programmers I know are not the best spellers, which is interesting because they type all day, right? So let's type in vector 3. Now, you might be like, what the heck is a vector 3? Well, this might scare you if you've taken linear algebra or calculus and you're like, oh my God, no, not this, not back to this again. It's actually not bad. All it is it's saying we want to access three numbers. So this is a vector 3, x, y, and z. So it just says 0, 0, 0, or 1, 1, 1. And we're not actually going to compute anything. We just want to store in on the x, y, and z the horizontal axis, which is, let's take a look at this. So if I move my sphere, let's go to our movement, our position here. This is the y-axis. Notice that if I move it, I can move it up and down by controlling these values. And here's the x-axis. And here's the z-axis. And what I want to do is, as I press those keys, I want to move these individual values. So the way to do that is with a vector 3, we're going to just store, I'm going to call it movement. I want to store these presses. So if I'm pushing the left arrow key, I need to hold that in sort of this vector 3 and then push that vector 3 to the sphere. So for example, here's this variable I called movement. And I'm going to make it equal to a new vector 3. I'm just giving it, the new keyword means we're giving it some memory. Now if I enter 0, 0, 0 here, now let's put an F behind this 0 because they're supposed to all be float values. It's only going to store 3 zeros, so it's going to store its current position. So right now, if our sphere is at, let's do 0, 0, 0, this is 0, 0, 0 in our world, right? Let's move this over a little bit so we can see that. So right now, this sphere is centered in our world. Actually, I should move it up a little bit. And I want to adjust these values so that when I press the key, it'll roll forward on the Z. So where I'm going to get those values is I'm just going to grab this move horizontal because this is our X value. That's our X. So I'm just going to highlight it and I'm going to paste in move horizontal. And then I'm going to grab my move vertical and I'm going to grab this and this is our move vertical. Now the last thing we need to do, I'm going to save this because our sphere isn't going to move, is we need to grab this rigid body that we created earlier and we need to add force, which means we're going to push it based on some sort of value. So if I do RB dot add force, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do movement times speed. All right, and I'm going to save this. Now, with this on there, if everything is right in the universe, if I press play right now, I'm pushing my arrow keys, you can see I'm actually rolling my sphere around. I'm doing this with the arrow keys. Now let's try out WASD. All right, so what is your assignment? Well, you're going to, and post this on your website, is you're going to create a maze for your sphere to get through, okay? And later we're going to build this out, and this is more of a test. So I'm going to go to Game Object, or I'm sorry, Tools, Pro Builder, and then we're going to go to Pro Builder Window, make sure that's open, and we're going to make a new shape, and we want to make sure it's a cube, and let's position it over here. Let's go ahead and build this cube. Now remember what we learned before, so let's kind of go over this a little bit. If I select this face, I can scale it out. So let's kind of scale it out to create a wall. And let's say I want and you can just duplicate this cube if you want. Like if you feel like, okay, well, I feel better about duplicating and then sort of rotating it. I press the E to select my rotation to make a other part of my maze. Or sometimes what I like to do is, it's good to have them as different modular assets, but I'll hit Shift again and that'll extrude it. Notice the line? And then from here I can select this, hold Shift, and extrude it out. And it gives me a seamless cube. And then we switch back to our plane here, select this edge, these other two sidewalk edges, and pull it out this way, pull this out this way. So you get a lot of creative freedom with your maze. Just make it big enough that um, I'm going to have a bunch of questions on there. So this is your first foray into puzzles. And then what we'll do is, I'm going to make mine pretty easy. The goal is to get this cube, which we'll do in the next video. So 3D object, cube, here. The goal is to find this cube, and once you do that, you'll win. So I'm going to make mine again, almost a tutorial level where, let's kind of do something like this. And let's duplicate this guy by hitting Control D. And I'm going to rotate this. Let's go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees. Let's close this up. So the whole goal right now, I'm going to make it fairly easy for them. They can only go this way or that way. Is to get this sphere. So what we'll do in the next video is we will get this object right here.